Despite Arsenal making huge strides already in the transfer window this summer, there is reports about another defender coming in, being Jeremy Jacquet. Now in this video, we're going to talk about why he could fit the team potentially this summer and in the future, and just why he is one of the best young talents in the world, which may be too good to pass up on. So let's get into it. Now, I know many of you going into this will be sick of the rumours of Arsenal with another defender, but Jeremy Jacquet, I will tell you straight away, is the truth. Now, Jacquet was actually a player that I spoke about as a potential backup centre-back right at the start of the window. I did a thread on Twitter, he was a part of that. Ultimately, Arsenal didn't really move on him, I think, because Rennes signed him to a new contract just a couple of weeks ago, which obviously put it out of play, and they have continually said he is not for sale. However, Jeremy Jacquet as a player is definitely one of the most outstanding young defenders in the world, proving his worth on loan at Clermont Foot in Ligue 2 last season. Then he ended up being recalled by Rennes in January, where he became a mainstay in their team in Ligue 1 at just the age of 19, so you can tell this guy is good, just turning 20 a couple of weeks ago. Now, to explain Jeremy Jacquet, he is a right-footed defender who mostly plays as a right centre-back, but has also delved into right-back a few times. He is a very tall guy, and he is quite lanky. He is someone that isn't necessarily going to be really big and physical right now, but he is someone that is tall, methodical in his ways, and is that more technical type of defender, being that Rolls Royce of sort of player. This is where obviously the links to Saliba come in. Now, despite saying that, Jeremy Jacquet as a proper pure defender is the best when he can delve out of the defence and kind of push himself onto players quite far up. Now, he is someone that has that sort of aggressive gene, a bit like a Gabriel and a little bit like a Mascara as well, where they want to pull out from the defence and be willing to push up against players to win the ball back. This season have to be very alert and be very good at watching space and making sure people don't run in behind, but also being that guy that takes control of moments when the ball is bouncing towards him, trying to get to them second balls, and then 50-50s a lot is part of his game. Now, because of his aggressive approach off the ball and the fact he is always quite willing to go very far forward to win the ball back, which you could argue without Gabriel and maybe a Mascara now, they're the only two real Arsenal players that have that, he has incredibly high tackle and interception numbers per 90. If you're looking at the stats, they look insane, and I do think all defensive stats need to be taken in context, because someone who plays for Rennes is going to have to make a lot more tackles than someone who plays for Arsenal, but they are still quite incredible. He's clearly very willing to come out and be aggressive off the ball. Something else about his defensive style as well is that obviously he is that more protector player. He is not necessarily someone you want as the last ditch defender, being the person that has to make sure he deals with the one-on-ones and kind of shovel people out, a little bit like you see Saliba do, and even Gabriel has improved at it heavily over the last 18 months. Jeremy Jacquet is someone that really is better, I think, further away from his goal, so he doesn't really benefit, I think, being in like a low block or a mid block, but obviously you would think for Arsenal that transition would be fine. We have the ball a lot, we're a very possession based side, and so he wouldn't have to necessarily worry about sitting in a block too much. And you have to admit, Arsenal have a lot of other defenders right now who probably can do that a lot better. Now, in terms of his actual tackling style, he has these really long strides because he is very tall and lanky, but not necessarily big. So when he goes in for a tackle, he will kind of jog up to you and then slide in really calmly. Sometimes his defensive style reminds me of Van Dijk, but way more aggressive. And what I mean by that is obviously Van Dijk is that more jockeyer player. He'll sit off you and kind of wait for you to do things. But how Jeremy Jacquet kind of gets around the pitch, he kind of jogs around the same sort of style, but then will be physical in a tackle. But this accomplished by the fact he is incredibly quick really helps him close down them gaps and be very calm at winning the ball, which is obviously why his tackle numbers are really high as well. He's a very, very good tackler. He always has this sort of calmness on the pitch when he makes these tackles to make sure people can't get past him, and his incredible pace and height already make him one of them athletes that you have to look at, which we have consistently seen come out of Ligue 1 over the last couple of years. And he is one of them players that I think can even adapt to be a bit more of a low block, less aggressive player because of the calmness that he has, but he is very meticulous of how he uses it, and sometimes he will just smash into the back of you very aggressively, but even then he does it in a very calm persona, which is kind of weird from the player we're talking about. And in one-on-one perceptions, I don't think he's necessarily the best when he's running back to goal too much, but when he can get there quite quickly and kind of anticipate where the winger or the forward is going, he is actually very good at kind of shifting people onto their weaker foot. I do think a lot of his tackles, despite him being that sort of more aggressive type of player, come off more intelligent than necessarily rash. Something I've said about Mosquera, and I think this is still true, off the ball, Mosquera can be kind of rash in decisions, but is that more aggressive type what Arsenal have obviously been looking for. Now, with Jeremy Jacquet, he doesn't really have that in terms of just being a straight bash head player. He is very much more calmer of making these tackles and taking his time, and even then they come off aggressive, but he knows what he's doing, which I do think has that sort of ability to be better. And it does kind of remind me a little bit like Saliba. Saliba is not very aggressive all the time. He can be more aggressive when he's played with a Kivior alongside him, but he is that person that will take his time, is the more Rolls-Royce defender, and will then get a foot in to be very well. Jeremy Jacquet has that, but he also has that aggressive level where he is very dominant in these duels and will compete, which I do think is a major point where he kind of is a little bit of a similarity between a Saliba and a Gabriel, which is interesting. Now, while that is obviously off the ball, and obviously that is an incredible, importantly part about being an Arsenal player and any defender in the world, but arguably being an Arsenal defender also means you have to be incredible on the ball, which is a big part of it as well. Now, he is, I'd say, a Rolls-Royce of a player more when it comes to on the ball more than anything. On the ball, he looks so calm, making passes and deciding tempo. Nearly every single pass that I've seen this guy make is at the complete right weight of pass, distance as well, just in front of players sometimes so they can run onto it just where they need it, but not being too rash and making passes when he needs to, calming things down and then finding them passes through the gaps, which you might see sometimes. When he wins the ball up from these physical duels and pushing up the pitch, and it's very much like we spoke about Mosquera before, is that you need to be comfortable of pushing that ball up the pitch or maybe making a pass. Now, I've said before, I think Mosquera is a little bit more of a passer, and I think Jeremy Jacquet is a very good passer, especially in these sort of wider positions. He seems to really be very good at finding the passes through and finding these little gaps in the half spaces, which I really like. But Jeremy Jacquet is very confident and is a big carrier player. His lankiness and his pace, which we spoke about in defensive and covering areas, is brilliant at going forward. And he takes nearly 0.5 successful tackles per 90, which is really high for defenders. And especially when one player goes out to press him, with that pace and power and the great dribbling ability that he has on the ball in especially closer areas, he really does just go past players and runs into that space very well, and it is an incredible thing to see. Now, what I will say is that he does do this quite a lot in games. He tries to run past players, probably way too much than you would want in the future, but it's definitely something he's still developing and something he wants to do with the ball when he finds it. This is really comfortable, and this is obviously a brilliant way to break the press when teams push forward. And arguably, you look at someone like Saliba for Arsenal on the ball, when he does that, it really does help Arsenal get out of pressive situations and sort of have overloads. But I do think that could be something that Arsenal use in the future, more these dribbling, carrying type of players, which he is definitely more leaning to than some of the others that Arsenal have. But obviously, this is risky, and you wouldn't want him to do it all the time, but you would think with players around him being able to cover gaps a bit better and being more comfortable on the ball, it shouldn't be too much of an issue. And what I will say is that he is not someone that passes the ball a lot. If you look at his passing stats, obviously have to be taken with a pinch of salt, of course. He isn't necessarily doing a lot of passes per 90. I think his passing level is really good, and I don't really believe in that pass completion because he actually has a lot of long passes, which obviously is going to make it go down. But only making 49 passes per game can be a team-dependent thing, but also he is not necessarily that passing reliant. They have other players around him who are more likely to do that. Well, he is that guy that will carry the ball up, so it's definitely a stylistic fit as well. And in terms of his overall aggressiveness, I do think to come into the Premier League at his age and be very young, I think he needs to maybe adapt that a little bit and be a little bit more calmer in certain situations, especially for a team that has the ball a lot like Arsenal. He can't just always be pinging these balls in behind or trying to run through an entire team. That's just not going to work. So obviously calming that down when you play for a team that are much more comfortable with the ball, I think will be a big adaptation, which I'd like to see. Now, maybe a weird one as well, but we need to talk about the in-the-box attacking situations that he is also very good at. Now, I do think in defensive situations in the box, he can maybe still be a little bit out of position sometimes. I think he makes some mistakes there. He is definitely a much more comfortable player away from the goal, yet he is still learning, and I still think he's decent there. In attacking boxes, he does seem to be very, very effective. What he likes to do, especially from free kicks and corners and these certain different situations, is not necessarily be that first line of contact contact with the ball, i.e. being that main header, being that guy that really is aimed for in the box despite his height. He likes being this sort of secondary attacker. There's many times where I see maybe a free kick not work or they pass it around the edge of the box and he just makes runs in behind. He loves having that sort of effect in the box and getting away shots. I mean, he nearly has a shot per 90, which for a defender is quite a lot. Not only that, in the box as well, he likes having the ball and he likes being comfortable at giving the ball to teammates and working with them to get a goal in, which I do find very interesting. And maybe not the on-the-ball style that Saliba really fits into towards the box, but I do think Saliba can have a lot of similarities to him. I think about Arsenal's corners where Saliba is that more second option. He's not really the first one we aim for. That's more Gabriel, even a Timber, you could argue. And then it kind of bounces to Saliba. We usually have players that head the ball onto him so he can get the ball closer to the box. Little bit like Jacquet, I think, does for them, but I do love his attacking movements in the box as well, which I think are really key. Now, if we are going to talk about some weaknesses, because of course this guy's 20 years old, he's going to have some. I do think in the air he can be quite inconsistent. Maybe some similarities to Mascara there then. Yet again, despite the height he has, he's not always comfortable at winning duels in the air. Sometimes jumps a bit too early, sometimes not paying too attention. And I think a lot of the time, even though his aerials aren't brilliant, even though he hasn't got brilliant stats in them areas, when you actually watch him, a lot of the time he is playing as like sort of a wide centre back. So he's playing up much of these wing positions, like we said, picking the ball up, passing it a lot more there as well. This allows him to have 1v1s against wingers rather than forwards, and you have to think forwards in the Premier League would be a lot harder, and maybe wingers in the air would obviously make him more comfortable. Even then, I still think he struggles a little bit. Now, immediately playing the other side of the argument, which we just said, because he is playing as this wide centre back in a back five, he isn't necessarily always getting into a lot of duels either. The ball isn't really that far, it isn't really going to go to these wide areas as much in the air, so you have to argue that maybe the sample size is too small to judge his percentage, yet his percentage isn't very good. And it is a weird one because in the box he has shown the ability to score headers, you know, he has shown the ability to get on the end of things as well, but a lot of the time I just don't think he has the power behind his headers a lot, and maybe even the precision. Like, it doesn't really add up all the time. He kind of gets the area right, but the power is just a little bit off. And I think the last big weakness is, we did touch on it before, but it is about his style and how aggressive he is. He's not necessarily someone that wants to calm things down, and he's not necessarily someone that will put his body on the line. Now, I think for Arsenal, this is okay, maybe in certain situations compared to other teams that he will be linked to, maybe stepping stone clubs. I think it could be a little bit harder for him to adapt to. But if you're going to be that aggressive type of defender, you're going to run out of the defense and kind of push yourself up against these players, you have to win the ball, or have to be able to cover that ground in the back. He can do that, and he has showed he can do that, but it's not necessarily always consistent, and we need him to come back and help the team. So, for instance, I don't think him and a Gabriel would work particularly well together. I think there's too many similarities, especially off the ball, of how they defend. And I will say, all of his stats have to be taken into context because he has only played about 900 minutes, so these stats are coming from a very short amount of sample size. So obviously you would want to see them kind of develop and bed in a little bit more when he plays at this high level, and played in a back three or a Ren is obviously going to be a much different experience. So there could be some real big adaptation problems. Now, the last thing to really talk about is, why are Arsenal looking at him now? Where does this fit in the squad? And is this smart squad building? Overall, I think a lot of people are confused because the reports are coming out by Fabrizio Romano and even other people where he looks to be coming in, or at least being looked at, as a replacement for even a Kivior or a Zinchenko leaving. Now, I don't hate if Zinchenko leaves and we bring in Jacquet as a one-to-one sell and buy. I think that's absolutely fine. He is only 20 years old. But of course, they are both left-footed defenders who play primarily on the left back and left centre-back role, while Jeremy Jacquet is more of a right centre-back and right-back role, which I can definitely see there may be confusion happening. Now, what I think is probably going on, obviously I don't know, it's just me assuming, but I can imagine that Arsenal are trying to probably balance their defence a little bit more. Mascara is a right centre-back and he is a right-footed player by many reasons, but he's also a left centre-back as well. He can easily play on the left, he uses his left foot a lot in games and is very comfortable doing it. So if he has to be that left centre-back backup for now, if Calafiori's injured, if Kivior leaves, then he can easily do that, and I don't think that's too much of an issue. I think if you look at the left backs that Arsenal had last season, we had Calafiori, Miles, Kivior, Tierney, and Zinchenko arguably. So there's obviously a lot of players there. While you look at the right side, and we've only really got White and Timber, and they are also covering for Saliba. So even a Mascara coming in doesn't necessarily balance it too much. Now, there's two ways this kind of works. On the left side, if you're looking at Miles, Calafiori, Gabriel, and even a Kivior if he stays, let's say, that could be your 4 options out there. If you look on the right and your options are Ben White, Timber, Saliba, and Jacquet as your 4 options out there, then that makes sense. And a Mascara can easily back up in left centre-back and right centre-back and cover both if needed to be, if we have more injuries. Now, is that a little bit overkill? Yes, that is a little bit overkill in my opinion. But I don't think this deal necessarily is persuading me that is necessarily going to be why we sign him. Now, there was obviously links with Yoel Hato before the summer, but it seemed like we didn't really bother in the end, really. Maybe it's to do with the £35 million that Chelsea ended up buying him for, or maybe the fact Kivior and Zinni are still here might be a big issue. But ultimately, we wanted to buy a really young project defender like a Hato and give him game time somewhere, maybe now, but in the future as well, which I don't think necessarily lined up with him and how big he is. I think with Jeremy Jacquet, he is one of them players that can probably be delved into the squad over time, where he doesn't necessarily even play that many minutes right now. He hasn't even played that many minutes in general, and ultimately can be that project player around the same age, got the same sort of accreditation in Europe, despite being on the other side. As Fabrizio Romano reports, they don't want to sell him, Bren. They signed him on a new deal a couple of months ago, and it doesn't look likely they want to get rid of one of their best talents who's only just played for their club. He only played 11 games this season, coming back off loan in January. And it also says in there that Arsenal remain keen on him, but they also want him in 2026. So there is a world where Arsenal even buy him now, depending on the price, and loan him back to Rennes, very much like the Saliba style deal that we did back in the day, buying him for £30 million when he was 18. Or we wait for him to have another year at Rennes and develop even more, keeping Mascara at the club right now, you know, making sure we can buy some more attacking players as well. And then Jeremy Jacquet can come in next year when we've got that pre-agreement there. We've probably put money to a side for him for that season, and then we don't lose out on this incredible talent. I can see why Arsenal as a club might be a bit reluctant to do that right now, given the fact we did that with Šeško and what happened there. They tried to scam us, and there's just not a lot of reliability in the market anymore, especially for deals like this for great talent. But ultimately, if Arsenal don't have the money this summer, that is something we're going to do, because is this going to be a 10 to 15 mil sign like Mascara? In my opinion, no. We're looking at probably double that or even more, so it's going to be a little bit expensive given how much we can pay. Now, overall, I think he would be a brilliant signing for the club, especially considering that talent, and I don't think you can really disregard our talent ID for defenders. It just is class, and this is a guy I've spoken about for a few months now, not really thinking we would be linked to, so it's kind of interesting to see we are. But it also, more importantly, says that Arsenal is still in the market this summer, depending on sales. We need to get rid of at least 4 players, being one of Trossard, Kivior, Nelson, Vieira, Zinni, and Lokonga. We realistically need to get rid of 4 or 5 of them to move off the squad and then hopefully buy some attackers like an Eze, maybe a winger, and maybe another defender. So we are definitely not done in this market. Now, thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you think about Jeremy Jacquet. Hopefully I said that right. Let me know in the comments, and let me know what you think. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one.